Hello friends, and welcome back to this course titled as Introduction to Indian Writing in English. Friends, we are discussing a very popular text in Indian writing in English. The name of the text is Swami and Friends. We talked about irony and humor in Swami and Friends. Then we talked about the evolution of self, the evolution of personality, and how Swaminathan can be considered as a protagonist in the novel. In today's lecture, we will look at the portraiture of adolescence in this novel Swami and Friends. Well, friends, you know very well that we are here dealing with school kids. They are, let's say, moving towards their adulthood. And in their adolescence, they are doing some kind of funny activities. They are doing some kind of immature or, let's say, innocent activities. But they are very serious in those things. For us, they can be immature, but in their own lens, they are very much matured. They are very much, let's say, serious in their all acts. So in this lecture, we will try to understand that how adolescent age is portrayed by R.K. Narayan in this book, Swami and Friends. But before moving to that, let's say, those characteristics of adolescent, let us talk about the outcome, what you are going to learn through this lecture. Elaborate the various character portrait dimensions of an Indian adolescent. Friends, this is very, very important. Maybe not for you because you are an Indian, but for a person who is from any other country. That person, after reading this novel, will understand that yes, this is how the adolescent thinks in India. This is the lifestyle of an adolescent, and this is how the age of adolescent can be considered as one stage of a person's life, and how much a person can live into that adolescent age is something which can be analyzed, which can be discussed, which can be portrayed by the reader who belong to some other part of the world. So, in this character portrait and the dimensions related to it, let us begin a discussion on the detailed elaboration of all these aspects. Swami is a paradox throughout the narration. R.K. Narayan does a wonderful job in bringing out his emotional psyche. I told you, friends, that Swami is a person who is very emotional. He is not as objective as Mani. He is not as dominating as Rajam. He is not as strict as his father. He is not as disciplined as his teachers. But he is something different from all these characters. And the thing which makes him different from all these is his emotional psyche. R.K. Narayan, when he talks about the character of Swaminathan in this novel, brilliantly portrays the mind of an innocent adolescent. And how can an adolescent, let's say, be called as a protagonist is something which is a skill R.K. Narayan was able to achieve through his work. While Swami sincerely and innocently believes in the sanctity of his friendship with Rajam, Rajam remains aloof and impersonal. Maybe Swaminathan do not know. about the actual behavior of Rajam. He thinks Rajam as his role model. He thinks Rajam as very ideal for him. He wants to behave like Rajam. He wants to live like Rajam. We had seen it in the incident when father asks Swaminathan to study, to remove the dust from his books. And Swaminathan says that I do not want to study because in the vacation time, Rajam also do not study. So in this example, we see that Rajam, although very impersonal and very aloof towards his friends, including Swaminathan, Swaminathan is the one who is always thinking about Rajam. He is trying to imitate like Rajam. He is trying to behave like Rajam. And in this way, Rajam is a role model for him. Swami's relationship with his peer group is very complex. As so-called friends, the novel is full of irony and subtle wit and also disturbing. Well, if we talk about the relationship between these friends, I must say that on one hand, the relationship is simple, but on the other hand, that is also very complex. Although it is a group of peers, all are equal to each other, but that equality is not seen from the behavior of these friends, which, let's say, creates an irony and subtle wit into this, let's say, limited sphere of friends. It is also disturbing because we think that a friendship is always emotional. It is always pious. It is always positive. But then friendship has its own, let's say, sacrifices. If the person is selfish, then he or she do not want to give those sacrifices. And in that way, the friendship relation cannot reach to a, let's say, ideal extent. Friendship at that age is nothing more than peer pressure. And this is the fact that Swami cannot fathom. Well, friends, friendship, an adolescent do not do friendship by choice, but friendship is something which is forced upon these adolescents. They are studying in the school. They cannot share their feelings with their parents because parents are very aged. They cannot share their feelings with their teachers because teachers are very, let's say, reserved to them. Teachers are very, let's say, objective to them. Then how are they going to share their feelings? With whom are they going to share their feelings? Well, in this way, I can say that the friends are the only relieving point to relieve the ideas which are going on in your mind, to relieve the maturity which you are getting from the experiences and from the exposure of the world. Swami tries to impress his friends and peers, like all the adolescent people do. He tries to impress his friends. He tries to, let's say, influence his peers. The people, peers means those who are equal to him, his classmates, equal age, equal class, etc. He acts impulsively and loses control of himself in more than one occasion. Friends, I told you that Swami is an emotional boy, and thus he is impulsive. He suddenly goes into his virtual world from the real world, and he loses his senses. He starts thinking, let's say, he lost somewhere. And in that kind of condition, more than once he goes into this novel. He gets little emotional support at home or from his peers. Friends, if I talk about Swaminathan, he is an emotional person, and an emotional person needs an emotional support. But he do not get it from his friends. The school is a place where life is tough. This is right. Because in the school we have competition with the peers. In the school we have the pressure of let's say homework, classwork, attending the classes regularly, attendance, and performing well in the exams. Constant pressure from all directions finally tells on Swami and his bends. This is right. An emotional person may have palpitations in this situation. An emotional person may feel collapsed in this, let's say, stressful situation. And similar kind of things happen with Swaminathan also. Although he is not mentally sick, but his emotional attitude, his very innocence makes him little offending in different kind of situations. Narayan also gently laughs at the world in which Swami lives. Well, this is right. R.K. Narayan, when he observes the lifestyle of Swaminathan, he also feels, let's say, humorous. He also feels little happy that how an adolescent lives in these situations. The paradoxes of pre-independence India, the alternate aloof and passionate nature of the people, the confusion that encompasses the mind of a child in such a volatile environment, all those things are brought out beautifully. This is right, friends, because we must not forget that Swaminathan is living in the colonial period. He is living under the rule of Britishers. He is living under a, let's say, country which is not independent. The country which is, let's say, being exploited by the Britishers. And this has affected the mind of Swaminathan also. He is not away from those paradoxes. He is not away from those ideas. He is not away from those, let's say, depressions. And those things are visible from his behavior. Narayan takes a dig at the educational system too, as envisioned by the British masters. There were few incidents, friends, when Swaminathan was studying in a missionary school and he was taught by a few Christian teachers from some British teachers, British masters, who wanted to treat Swaminathan like their slave, not like their student. And Swaminathan observes it and feels offended. The use of the cane, the degrading and humiliating nature of the stand up on the desk punishment, the heavy workload are all shown up by Narayan for what they are, a cruel way of education. Friends, in that time when Swaminathan used to live, giving physical punishments to the students was very common. And missionary schools are popular everywhere for their discipline. And all the kids who are, let's say, studying in a missionary school, they have to follow that kind of discipline. They will be punished for that. They will feel uncomfortable into that situation. They think that they are under some chains, under some pressure. And Swaminathan also feels that kind of punishment when he is asked or his friends are asked to stand up on the desk, or maybe they are punished by the teacher if they score less marks in the class test. This is a cruel way of education. This is right, but it was the reality of Malgudi. It mass produces unimaginative clerks and subordinate staff to serve in the British administrative machine. Well, friends, this kind of treatment given to the Indian students was intentionally done in the Christian missionary schools. Why? Because they expected the mind of the Indians to be converted to an unimaginative clerk. A clerk is a person who cannot think anything from his or her mind. A clerk is a person who is not creative. A clerk is a person who cannot innovate anything. And such kind of subordinate staff or a subaltern person was expected by British administrative machinery. Britishers wanted to convert all the Indians into that kind of mindset where Indians have to depend on Britishers for such kind of, let's say, decision making. The real irony of this is seen when Swami runs away from the board high school and feels nostalgic about his old school, the Albert Mission. Friends, I told you earlier also about this incident. In one incident, Swaminathan, when he shifted to a new board high school, he runs away from that school because he disliked the discipline there. He becomes nostalgic. Nostalgic means thinking about the past. He starts thinking about his days in Albert Mission. And in this way, this person, Swaminathan, is, let's say, evolving his personality and his adolescence. In the final analysis, Swami and Friends is more than the story of a child. So this is correct, friends. This is not a child literature. This is not a children literature. But this is a maturely developed novel. If you read this novel, you will find that this aspect of our life, the adolescent age, was missed in many of the novels of the world. And R.K. Narayan worked as a filler with the help of this novel, Swami and His Friends, into the world of literature. It is the story of a generation of Indians who are born and brought up in the shadows of the British colonial Raj and who inherit the confusion of the cultural and social conflict. And Swaminathan and his friends were the victim of that. If we look at, let's say, the personality of Swami, we will see that there is some kind of cultural conflict. There is some kind of social conflict which is visible into his personality. We can observe from his maturity of behavior. This is best seen where Swami is seen alternatively admiring and envying Rajam, the rich boy who walks to school dressed like the European. Well, friends, Swami was obsessed with Europeanism, the British power, the British dominance, and he, when looks at Rajam, wants to become like a Rajam, wants to behave like a Rajam. And this suggests the dilemma which is going on in the mind of an adolescent child. Swami is caught between two worlds as represented by Mani and Rajam. On one hand, Swami looks at the personality of Mani, who is like a local boy of Malgudi. On the other hand, Swami looks at the personality of Rajam, who is, let's say, an epitome of eliteness in his circle. And thus, he is always thinking about the differences between the behavior of Mani and Rajam. Rajam, who stands for all, this is posh and urbane, smooth and unemotional, well educated yet hard and ruthless in the way. Just like the British rule, the British governance. Rajam is unemotional. Rajam is well educated but hard. Rajam is ruthless. Rajam is dominant. But even then, Swami wants to behave like Rajam because Swami thinks that Rajam has a very polished behavior. Rajam has a very urban and elite behavior. Rajam is a, let's say, very rich kind of person. The other end is Mani, who is rough, untamed, knave, emotional, and yet local. When Swami thinks about Mani, he thinks about all the negative characteristics of Mani. Because Mani is just like the other boys who are living in Malgudi. He is just like a localite. The masterly irony is seen because these two characters not only meet, but in Swami's eyes, they also apparently get along well. With the help of these two characters, Swami is able to differentiate and adapt like whom he should behave. He has two choices, whether he should behave like Mani or he should behave like Rajam. And he accepts the behavior of Rajam. To the end, Swami cannot understand the difference and hence the pathos in the final scene. When we reaches to the final of the novel, we see that Swami is at the end still in the state of confusion. He is trying to understand the differences between Rajam and Mani, and hence there is a pathos which happens in the behavior of Swami. Narayan passes no judgment on anybody. Narayan do not want to say that who is right and who is wrong, but he, let's say, leaves it to the readers. He presents Swami for what he is and also the world around him for what it is. Why? Because R.K. Narayan wants that Swami should take his own decisions. Because after adolescence, Swami is going to be a man and he must take his decisions that like whom he should behave. His style is smooth and simple. His sentences are crisp yet unconventional. This is the characteristic of R.K. Narayan. When he is talking about any character, very smoothly, in very simple words, he talks about the pathos and dilemma in the character. He used the certain Indianism might alienate the foreign reader, yet they convey his meaning adequately. Sometimes, if the foreign readers are reading this text, they might feel that there is too much Indianism in the works of R.K. Narayan, but that is what makes him different from the other writers. And those kind of adequate meanings can be understood if we read the text between the lines. The apparent discontinuity of narration at places serve to enhance rather than dispel the overall effect. Well, friends, if we talk about the overall effect of the text, we can say that there is discontinuity of narration. The narration is, let's say, described into pieces, into fragments, and we have to compile all those pieces, and then we have to make a novel of our own. We have to make a definition of our own in this novel. The cultural aspect is very visible throughout. For example, Swami's fearful respect towards his father, his closeness to his grandmother, his turbulent relationship at school, and his total emotional isolation in spite of physical proximity to so many people are so typical of Indian life, where visible demonstration of love and care are seen as signs of weakness and a thing of shame. Well, this is right, friends. Swaminathan need an emotional support, for which he goes to his grandmother. But then he learns self-control from his father. At the school also he is confused that who is his true friend. He is emotionally isolated. He is, let's say, in the proximity of physicalness in the novel. And there are so many characters around him who are suggesting the typical Indian mindset or typical Indian lifestyle. And Swami has to decide among all those characters that with whom he must go. He must go with objectivity, dominance, and eliteness, or he must go with love and care. Throughout, Swami grovels in darkness around him and yet does not see himself as being in the dark. This is the final irony and the one that cuts deepest. Well, friends, Swami is a character who do not know that he is an ignorant person, that he is an innocent person. He thinks that he is very mature. He thinks in the adolescent age also only, he thinks that he is a matured person, but he is actually not. And this is the actual irony in this work. We have to understand that Swami is trying to explain, that Swami's personality is trying to explain that in this age of adolescent, everyone is confused. The decision-making power is very less in a person's mind, and a person thinks that he is restricted into chains from his family, from his teachers, etc. And Swami, throughout the novel, is struggling to come out from those chains and to become a decision maker. So that is all for today. I hope that you have understood all the, let's say, dimensions of this novel, Swami and Friends, and the personality of Swaminathan, our protagonist, in detail. That is all for today. Thank you for listening.